Deathpod has been getting quite a lot of flack lately for the way their episodes are written and the, let's say, less than perfect quality of their conclusions, and I wanted to talk about it. This is something I've had on my mind since the Kickstarter era began, and it's only grew as I've become more involved in the Versus community. This is going to be more of like a freeform style of video, as I'll be going over several different aspects of the series that I've had on my mind, both positive or negative. This also is not meant to be hateful or antagonistic or anything towards the crew, as I literally only criticize the show out of a love for it and a desire to see them do the best they can. I have watched this show for way too long to be, non-stop hateful towards it. Starting off, I wanted to go over common mischaracterization issues that the show sometimes suffers from. Everyone wants to see their favorite character represented in a way that feels accurate to how they are in their home series, and this isn't like an exclusive complaint towards the Kickstarter era, because this has quite literally been a factor since Season 1. However, I feel like as Death Battle has grown, they've gotten better at giving characters proper characterization. This, in turn, means the few times that they don't do that, people are going to be even more upset because it feels, like they're being left out of what everyone else gets. For example, there are a lot of scenes in recent episodes that people do not like because they felt it was really out of character for the sake of a silly gag. One of the first examples I think of is Maka punching Ruby, which, while admittedly pretty funny, is something that if you actually know the characters is going to feel really, really out of place. Another example of mischaracterization is when a character just does not fight like how they're supposed to. A lot of people got upset over how Reze was characterized through her fight, and a way bigger and honestly easier to show example is Eggman. He never fights like this in his home series, and during his fight with Bowser, he pretty much just throws one punch and then acts as mission command. Yet in his home series, he's piloting mech after mech and doing all sorts of actual, close quarters fighting. I feel like this is an issue that, as of lately, has mostly been remedied, as we've kind of gone away from having to say, oh, this entire character was, acting nothing like how he's supposed to, and nowadays people just have to go, oh, well, this one scene wasn't, but the rest was fine, which is okay. It's still an aspect that could use some improvements, but it's fine. I think that a silly gag mid-fight every now and again is okay, and even if it can be a bit much, I feel like it's nothing too harmful sometimes. Although I do think there are some examples, like Denji kicking Yuji in the balls, which, while it's pretty funny, I think can go overboard with the second time, because the second time it feels really out of character for Yuji to fall for it. I know a lot of people have issues with him falling for it the first time, but at least there's plausible deniability there. The second time, you even could have had it fixed by having him say something along the lines of, but he doesn't even have cursed energy, and, to set up the idea that he's confused how someone without cursed energy is about to pop a domain, and that could get the excuse for Denji to get in on him. However, they didn't do that and had the guy who's famous for running face first into a domain every single time get shocked and kicked in the balls by Denji just saying the words out, which is something he would never do. The next issue I wanted to go over, and quite honestly is the biggest one, is their research and conclusions. And I don't just mean to call this out when my character loses. There are a lot of verdicts in recent years that I would say are clearly horribly worded, as I can even give you a great example. Gru versus Megamind. That conclusion, in my opinion, is so poorly put together that even if you agree 100% that Gru should win without a shadow of a doubt in your mind, you will still be watching a little confused. There's even some episodes where I agree with the outcome. I think the conclusion makes sense. I think that the reasoning of who wins is totally fine, but then they'll use a statement or a feat that makes no sense. I can give you an example here. I can understand Denji winning because I've seen plenty of arguments for it, and I think it is a very close matchup. However, they justify him winning with a statement that is, one, never been said, and two, blatantly contradicts a part of the story. The rest of their calcs and reasoning, I think, make perfect sense. I think the Gun Devil and the other high-end scaling for him is completely fine. I think that Yuji scaling for the most part is fine too. It's just that they harp on the Oregon level joke to the point where the rest of their reasoning feels swept under the rug. There's even arguments that you can just use the Oregon sword. You would just have to specify that you're scaling it to Yoru's bang attack, since they're both her telekinesis. Yet Death Battle makes no attempts to use that in the reasoning, and instead makes up a statement about the weight of the objects being one-to-one with the weapon they're made into, despite the fact that Part 2 blatantly disproved this at several points by saying the power of the weapons themselves are exclusively tied to Asa's guilt, not what she's made it into. There are like plenty of other examples of feats that should be mentioned directly rather than a black box, or they use a baffling calc that even G1's prediction blog couldn't predict. However, those are just the first examples I think of due to my knowledge on the subject matter and my knowledge of those franchises. Maybe these are less egregious if you're like a casual watcher, but for anyone that I know deep in the tank on Versus community, a lot of things like Cell being faster than Metal that bother them and feel really out of place. I think there is legitimately a really easy fix to this, as there's an episode that perfectly fixes this issue and I have no flaws with it. Bill vs. Discord at the end of the episode shows a really nice chart to showcase every major advantage and disadvantage on each side of the debate, and that's something that I would kill to see brought back, alongside a very small tweak to the category system. This would help solve literally every major complaint I've seen, as it forces Death Battle to blatantly say each advantage without risking someone misunderstanding. Because while the current category system I think is good, it clearly needs some refining, as aside from casual audience, I've seen so many people that have the same complaint of saying that they're weirdly phrased or put together. There are so many outcomes in Death Battle that I've had people legitimately ask me to go back when we're watching together so they can try to understand what they're talking about. Even if they know both series like the back of their hand, they're wondering what their reasoning was. This is a personal thing, but I would also love if they would start actually mentioning the high end or low end of certain characters, as that does both radically change the matchups and shows that they've done their homework. But that's honestly more if they brought back the pro-cons chart. If they didn't do that, then they don't got to worry about it for the conclusions. Something else that I genuinely believe Death Battle has gotten really good at is understanding a character's story or the message of a piece of media. However, sometimes it feels like major or sometimes mandatory parts of a character's story are left out in favor of simply assuming the audience already knows this. I don't think this is an issue for, let's say, Batman on his 4th episode to not have to reiterate that his parents were shot in an alley and everything about, his psychology from that. However, I think for characters like Ruby, Doomslayer, Yuji, Miles, and the list kind of goes on, I think there are huge, sometimes major parts of their story and character arcs that are completely overlooked or just straight up ignored when it'd be easier to just mention it. This is fine if you think that people already know what you're talking about. But most people don't know things like Yuji being a death painting or about Joker's found family and what they've done for him. So when you bring up a certain ability or win con in the conclusion or in the analysis, they're going to be confused on what the fuck you're talking about. And this kind of leads into another issue, which is the fact that lately there have been so few calculations in each episode. Take Groot vs. Megamind for example. This episode has about 1 calculation in the analysis and then 1 per stat in the conclusion. However, these calcs were barely brushed on during the actual rundowns, and it feels like the writer forgot they were making a versus debate video and not a plot synopsis. It feels like they're stuck in this weird middle where they want it to be normie enough for casual audiences to get it, so they don't want to mention the calculations and the versus content. However, they also at the same time want it to be for the versus community because that's what they were made for. And it really feels frustrating because you're like caught in the middle. The final major aspect I want to talk about is the animations themselves and how much they've genuinely improved over the years. I know it's obviously no shocker to say that an animation made in 2026 is going to blow season 1 episodes out of the water, but I just wanted to talk about how it's honestly kind of fucking insane that well-animated crossover fights between 2 of your favorite series can be released monthly and keep a quality that's consistent. Like, yeah, sometimes they have a winner you disagree with, or a scene you like doesn't happen, or unfortunately you kind of get a bad episode. That happens, and that's, a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But there's still incredible shots made by basically just a group of guys who don't really get enough credit for what they do. You see so many people basically just shit on the team constantly for the amazing jobs they do because, one scene bothered them, or the person you disagree with winning won. But this is still a show made by a handful of guys on YouTube that genuinely have shaped the YouTube space when it comes to crossover content. There are a few shows in the history of YouTube who can not only consistently get the real voice actors to reprise their roles, but also consistently get the attention of the actual studios behind the franchises. Just seeing franchises like Invincible, or even the writers behind Sonic and Mega Man, talk about Death Battle and join them on their podcast is insane. Where else were you going to see Silver the Hedgehog or Mike Guy, the real voice actors, play a role in a YouTube series when they're not like an indie corporation? It is so special to see that, and I can't really think of any other examples that of series that have that much of an impact when they announce a new episode. Overall, I don't want anyone to take this video as like a full-on hate piece toward Death Battle or anything too negative. This is just me talking about a show I love, and a show that one day, between you and me, I'd love to work on, as I've been a fan of the show ever since like I was a kid watching the TMNT Battle Royale, and they have shaped a huge part in who I am. This video pretty much exclusively exists to talk about what's been on my mind with the show for the last year or so, and I hope it got across everything I wanted to say. Oh, and one last thing, but if you liked hearing me yap about random shit, I do a weekly podcast with the Drunk Giraffe, and it's really fun. I've been able to ramble about some great franchises like Loser Ranger or Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, which is awesome. And please give this podcast all the support you can. We also make blogs, and I'm decently active on socials, so give me a follow if you want to hear me talk more about my hyperfixations. I also have a really large Death Battle Kickstarter video in the works, and if this video does decently, I'm not going to shoot too high, I will probably start releasing it broken into parts, and then maybe as a big final video. But always, have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.